Hi, my name is Danielle Williams. I'm a science teacher in Morrison, Oklahoma. I teach middle and high school science, and I've created a lesson I'd like to walk through with you called Green Glacier, Bane or Salvation. It is written for biology, next generation science standard for high school sciences, of course, with the life science being 2-6. This is where students need to evaluate a claim, evidence, and reasoning that ecosystems are relatively constant when things are constant in stable conditions, but anything that changes in their conditions or the ecosystem can result in an entirely new ecosystem. And so there are several disturbances that the students are going to observe throughout the lesson, but the main thing that we're focusing on here with the Green Glacier is the encroachment or the invasion of trees onto grasslands and other types of rangelands and the effect that that has on the ecosystem. And so all of my resources are located, in the drive. You have the teacher materials. So when you open up the teacher materials, you have the start here. You can go to the lesson plan. If you'd like, it kind of runs through what the standard is, approximations on times, and of course this will vary with your students. The learning objectives, some of the materials that are there, a brief summary of what they're going to be doing. So we're investigating the effect of the encroaching trees, and what we're going to be doing is, and the students are going to be doing, is looking at the effect on like biodiversity in regards to like the plants, maybe the other trees, some of the pollinators, some of the wildlife, the grazers and stuff that are there. We have life like on productivity, as we have when we talk about using them as rangelands for agriculture, and then some of the other ecosystem services. There is a rough 5E plan here located as well. Now, this lesson I think could work very nicely in a ecosystems, I guess, lesson format as you go, but ours ended up being that the way I had to implement it this year is we used it towards the end, and a lot of this kind of came down to the human impact transitioning to evolution. And so this was a good phenomenon that we used to kind of transition us into the evolution, and we talked about change over time. And so I don't show my students this particular slide, and I don't really give them a title. I mean, there's a title in their worksheet packet, but I don't really give that away to them in the beginning. Now, the Bane or salvation part, that part comes from the fact that many students believe that trees are good and they're good everywhere. And that's not always the case when we're talking about rangelands. The Bane part is really the truth of the matter. And I don't reveal that to the students, of course, because in the 5E nature format, they need to kind of work their way through all of this. But what happens with the Green Glacier is we are literally having a collapse of the ecosystem, not just the ecosystem, but the biome. So the grasslands biomes are transitioning into woodlands, and that's gone. I know they talk about to anthropogenic biomes may be different now, like the classifications and stuff in the past, but that's a whole other can of worms. So, okay, what I do is I do give these students this particular worksheet, and it does say Green Glacier, Bane or Salvation, but that doesn't really mean much to them because they're not familiar with it. And we're going to start here with the engage activity. What the students are going to be doing is they're going to receive a statement, and I project the statement up on the board. I explain the rules to the game. You can use red index cards, green index cards that are glued together, laminated together. You can give them to each student, or you can give them by tables. Mine are grouped at 4 per table, and we work on it that way. Go through the instructions. Basically, they're going to read the statement. They write the statement down on their sheet, so I've underlined the key points of what they're supposed to be doing. Then they need to quickly decide if that's a myth or a fact. I kind of do a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, much slower, of course, and then go over the answer with them. We briefly kind of go over it. They're going to record only the correct answers on their sheet, not their guesses, and then they're going to write a brief summary. So there are 5 of them. We pretty much address some of the things that I really want them to know, is that tropical rainforests are not the most endangered ecosystem. It's our very own temperate grasslands. And I say very own because we're located in Morrison, Oklahoma, kind of north central Oklahoma. That's right in the middle of the Great Plains. Just beneath us and to the east of us, we have what's called the cross timbers. So that's where it's kind of that transition area in between our grasslands and our woodlands. And so I also wanted them to know that grasslands can have trees. And so they can look a variety of ways. Lots of times historically the trees were found around water sources. This happens to be a field that's mostly grasses, and I showed the trees here and how they like to be near the water. Also, they can, one of the stations addresses this too, how you'll have large spaces of trees between, large spaces of grass between trees in places like savannas. Rangelands is really difficult, even for my students that are in agriculture, to understand, is that rangelands can be pastures, or pastures are rangelands, but not all pastures are rangelands. The difference is that your pastures can have any kind of species, and they are often, managed, agriculturally in ways that are going to be just for productivity, whereas rangelands are going to be native plants, often managed a little bit differently, and they can be grazed by animals that are natural, kind of like your wildlife and such, or by domesticated animals or, herds. I also wanted them to know that cedars are native to most of North America, and so this is really surprising to them. Fire doesn't kill all plants. Many are going to thrive with fire, and that's really the basis of a lot of what we do. I have them kind of look over this GIF. We just kind of talk out loud, watch it a few times. Sometimes it takes them maybe even up to 10 times of noticing that the numbers are changing, things are changing. And many of my students thought that this was wildlife spreading, or wildfire spreading, excuse me. Because we had some recent wildfires. And that's going to be the green glacier. That's the woody plants that are encroaching or moving. So here we have the beginning image, the end. We talk about the losses that are here in the Great Plains. And then we talk about, okay, well, trees. We've been taught our whole lives that trees are good, and we see all these things all over the place. How they're good for the planet, plant some trees. We give away trees at Arbor Day. We happen to be a tree city. And so how can they cause a collapse? And it's a little bit confusing. So I tell them to investigate this. We're going to see what is the effect of encroaching trees on rangelands? What does this mean? And they're going to be exploring some stations to do so. And what I do is I set up my stations. I will have to excuse me. My stations are in a slideshow, so if you really want to, you could put this on a computer. I set them, printed them out, I laminated them, I set them across the room, and there are a lot of different graphics that the students are going to be going over. Now, some of these questions are just pulling information that I want them to notice, just loading them, kind of front loading them with all of this information that they're acquiring on their own. Some of these I also ask them, do you have, are these species near your area? Do you see cedars? If so, where do you see cedars? And they evaluate lots of these different things. We look at calorie pairs as well. Calorie pairs are really common in our area, particularly near Stillwater. And so some of the kids are realizing for the very first time that these things aren't necessarily good. We address the butterflies, the birds, and all of these graphics are going to be ones that are there. Now, this particular graph and this other graph, what we mentioned here is that there's a wildfire, and these are two different areas. One of the areas has been managed for trees where they're trying to control them. So basically it's been managed for grasses. So you have optimum grasses here, and then you have the trees. And what the students are going to realize is that this particular area is slowly encroaching, or quickly encroaching with trees, and then boom, the wildfire hits. And what we know is that the trees go way down, but without that disturbance there, it starts to kind of go back up. And so this just kind of gets me a reading on where they're at, how they can read these graphs, and go about them. Now, at the end of their student sheet, they are going to be doing a CER. And so I have my students go from station to station. I believe there's 35 questions. And it took us, a full class period, a little bit over to the next. And so you can begin this the first day after you're engaged if you'd like, and then go on. We often do CERs, and that's where they have to answer the question, provide some evidence from the stations, and the reasoning. And the way I kind of designed it this way is I really want to drive home the importance of trees and the impact that they have in these areas. And yes, we need agriculture, we need our croplands, we need some of the introduced pastures and stuff where we have very productive species, but grasslands have a place too. And no matter what their focus is, whether it's agriculture, wildlife, pollinators, just beauty, whatever it happens to be, that we can find value in these, and they can benefit all of us. So on the Explain Day, we kind of come together and discuss, okay, well, what did you guys find from the stations? Was it too much information? Shout out some of the stuff that they found. Again, we reiterate where the rangelands are and how they're a very diverse group. They're basically anything that can be grazed by wildlife or, our livestock. And a lot of them think it's just livestock only. I utilized a video called Reconsidering Cedar in kind of like a little video case study, and I've broken it up into little bits. We're in the beginning. This is a ranch or two that's up in Nebraska. They go ahead and share their story. They talk about cedars and like they're a really bad thing, and then it's kind of the slow motion thing where we get to see that it's very, very time consuming and costly to tackle these cedars. They talk about how they needed the cedars there. They wanted them there, they're in previous generations because they offered shelter and they have value, but it's just simply not worth the cost. And then we, briefly discussed that after the video, a couple of things, how the cedars spread. We go on to talk about the effect on the biome and stuff. And so as we go through these, we realize that there are a lot of different areas that are having very much the same problems, encroaching trees. And a lot of that's because of the way we're managing the land. But it has huge, huge effects that extend well beyond the Great Plains. And that's more or less what I kind of wanted the students to understand. Now, addressing those, we talk about in the video, he talks about management and how management has got to change. And so this particular thing shows up when we go to the evaluate. So after we've gone through all of the explain part, they're going to be looking at some graphs. So this is displayed there. It's something they're familiar with, but this is really the focus of it. And what we're going to be doing is utilizing the I-squared strategy. And that's basically, and I've attached a link so you can access that as well if that's new to you. But what they do is they basically just point out, they're going to draw lines to 3 different spots on the graph, on each one of the graphs, and they're just simply going to write an observation. What do they see happening there? Then they go and in a different color pen or pencil write what it means. Beneath that, they're going to have to do a citation. And that citation is simply just putting those 3 observations and inferences together in one cohesive statement. Then I want them to go back up to this new order of business. And this is where they have to determine what stage is it likely at, and what do they think the plant or the animals happen to be doing at that particular area. And then they have some management strategy they need to recommend. That can all come from using this graphic here and any of the examples that we've used in the lesson. You could go right into the elaborate. Elaborate is simply just 3 or 4 questions that are a summary sort of thing, talking about woody plant encroachment, that green glacier, 3 ways that they negatively impact a rangeland ecosystem, so that should be clear to the students by now. And then we start talking a little bit more about the climate safe practices, and that was introduced at some of the stations, but they can go into more detail on it here. And again, it's the focus of their choice. And I love the fact that students have so much information here that they can pick and choose what they think is important. They get to evaluate this claim. Dr. Tidwell from University of Nebraska said in the video that the woody plant encroachment affects every citizen that lives in the Great Plains. I want them to use data from the lessons to support that statement, so they need to make those connections. And then lastly, I just kind of posed a scenario where a biology teacher that wants to basically get like an outdoor classroom, prairie classroom kind of set up, and wants the land, and they need to show like the school board, the school, that this is important. And I want them to choose one specific element that they should definitely include in the proposal, so something that's going to persuade them, and then why that's important for the education. So I needed them to have that connection kind of back to the community, and again, give some choices. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you use it in parts or whole and any of that, thank you very much, and have a great day.